My name is Amber Wright, and at 32 years old, I never expected to hear those words from my father's mouth. You're the most selfish daughter I've ever known. The accusation sliced through our family dinner like a knife, my sister Melody nodding in vicious agreement. 10 years of sacrifices, countless bills paid, and dreams deferred, all erased in that moment. I felt something finally break inside me. Without a word, I walked to my car, grabbed a folder, and returned to place 10 years of receipts on the table. I wonder where you're watching this from. If my story resonates with you at all, please hit like and subscribe as I reveal what happened when I finally stood up for myself. I grew up in a typical middle-class neighborhood in Portland where financial struggles were carefully hidden behind closed doors. My parents, Robert and Diana Wright, worked hard to maintain appearances, Dad as a sales manager at a local furniture store and Mom as an elementary school administrator. We weren't rich, but we had enough. At least that's what I believed until I turned 16. That year, everything collapsed. Dad lost his job during company-wide layoffs, and within months, Mom was diagnosed with lupus. The medical bills started piling up faster than we could manage. I remember finding Mom crying at the kitchen table late one night, surrounded by bills marked "Final Notice" in angry red letters. "We'll figure it out, Mom," I promised, though I had no idea how. 2 weeks later, Dad announced he was leaving. "I can't handle this anymore," he said, suitcase already packed. The divorce was quick and ugly. Dad moved to Arizona with minimal child support payments that rarely arrived on time. Mom's condition worsened, and Melody, only 14 then, retreated into a shell of anger and resentment. I had been accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship, my dream school for finance. But dreams don't pay medical bills. I deferred my enrollment and took a full-time position at the bank where I'd been working summers. The manager, Linda, took pity on my situation and gave me as many hours as legally possible. During evenings, I worked at a local restaurant serving tables to maximize tips. Between shifts, I enrolled in evening classes at our community college. For years of this grueling schedule, working days, studying nights, and managing Mom's healthcare resulted in my finance degree. It wasn't Cornell, but it opened doors. When Western Trust offered me an entry-level financial analyst position, I thought our struggles might finally ease. My starting salary was modest, but more than we'd had in years. Within my first month, I created a spreadsheet tracking every family expense: Mom's medication, $843 monthly, Melody's high school fees, groceries, utilities, mortgage payments I'd taken over when Mom had to reduce her hours. Melody graduated high school and announced she wanted to attend UCLA. "We can't afford that," Mom said gently. "Amber will figure it out," Melody replied, looking at me expectantly. And somehow I did. Personal loans, extra consulting work, and a strictly budgeted lifestyle allowed me to send Melody to her dream school while continuing to support Mom. Dad reappeared in our lives 5 years ago, right after I received my first significant promotion. His business venture in Arizona had failed, leaving him bankrupt at 57. "Family should stick together," he said, as if he hadn't abandoned us when we needed him most. Mom, always softer-hearted than me, welcomed him back. I remained cautious, but agreed to help him with rent until he got back on his feet. Temporary assistance became permanent support. Dad found part-time work, but never enough to sustain himself. Meanwhile, Melody graduated with an art history degree and moved back home, claiming the job market was impossible. She took unpaid gallery internships while I covered her student loan payments, car insurance, and daily expenses. My promotion to senior financial analyst came with a substantial raise, but my expenses grew proportionally. Each month, I transferred money to 3 separate accounts: Mom's medical expenses, Dad's housing costs, and Melody's perpetual emergencies. My own apartment remained sparsely furnished. My 6-year-old Honda needed repairs I kept postponing. Vacations existed only in the travel magazines I flipped through during lunch breaks. Every financial decision was filtered through a single question: is this more important than my family's needs? I created an elaborate tracking system with folders containing every receipt, bank transfer, and loan statement. Initially, this was for tax purposes, but it evolved into something more: tangible proof of my commitment when doubt crept in during sleepless nights. Last month, I received news of another promotion, this time to department director with a salary that could finally mean freedom. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream about financial independence, a home of my own, retirement savings, perhaps even that trip to Japan I'd been postponing for a decade. When I shared the news with my family, their reactions were telling. Mom offered genuine congratulations. Dad immediately mentioned his desire for a new truck. Melody asked if this meant I could help with the down payment on a condo she'd been eyeing. Looking at their expectant faces, I realized a troubling truth. In their eyes, my success wasn't mine at all. It was a family resource to be distributed according to their wants, not my needs. The cracks in our arrangement began showing about 18 months ago. What started as occasional financial emergencies had transformed into regular expectations. Each month brought new demands disguised as crises. Dad called one Tuesday evening as I was preparing presentation slides for a major client meeting. "Amber, I need $2,800 by tomorrow morning," he said without preamble. "What happened? Are you okay?" "Just some bills that got away from me. Nothing serious, but they're threatening to take my car." I transferred the money immediately, worried about him losing transportation. 2 weeks later, I discovered the truth from Mom. Dad had been gambling at the Riverboat Casino and lost his mortgage payment. This wasn't the first time. Mom had been covering for him for months. When confronted, Dad dismissed my concerns. "I'm a grown man, Amber. I don't need my daughter monitoring my spending habits." "You do when I'm the one funding those habits," I replied, only to be met with stony silence. Melody's emergencies followed a similar pattern. An urgent request for $3,000 for career development turned out to be a weekend getaway with friends in Miami. A necessary networking opportunity was actually a music festival in Coachella. Each discovery eroded my trust further. "You need to understand," Taylor, my best friend since college, told me over coffee. "They're exploiting your sense of obligation. This isn't love, it's financial abuse." I dismissed her concerns at first. "They're family. They'd do the same for me." "Would they, though?" Taylor challenged. "Have they ever?" That question lingered uncomfortably. In 10 years of supporting my family, I couldn't recall a single instance where they had sacrificed anything significant for my well-being. Ryan, the architectural engineer I'd been dating for 2 years, approached the subject more gently. We'd postponed moving in together twice because I couldn't afford to reduce my family contributions. "I'm not asking you to abandon them," he said during a rare weekend away. "But healthy boundaries protect both sides of a relationship. You're enabling behaviors that hurt them and destroy you." I started seeing Dr. Patel, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. During our 3rd session, she introduced a concept that resonated deeply. In dysfunctional families, certain members become designated givers while others become entitled takers, she explained. This pattern repeats until something forces a change. Usually, that's the giver reaching absolute depletion. "How close am I to depletion?" I asked. "You're running on fumes," she replied kindly. "The question is what happens when there's nothing left to give." That evening, I calculated the total financial support I'd provided over the past decade: $387,241. The number stunned me. It represented countless extra hours worked, promotions earned, opportunities sacrificed, and dreams deferred. I decided it was time for an honest family conversation about financial expectations. My promotion provided the perfect opening, a natural point to reassess our arrangement before patterns solidified further. When Mom called to invite me to Sunday dinner, mentioning exciting news to share, I accepted with cautious optimism. Perhaps they wanted to celebrate my promotion properly. Maybe they even planned to acknowledge the years of support and discuss a path toward their greater self-sufficiency. I spent Saturday preparing a gentle but firm speech about financial boundaries, practicing in front of my bathroom mirror until the words flowed naturally. I created a reasonable transition plan, 6 more months of full support, followed by gradually decreasing contributions as they built their independence. This can work, I told my reflection. We can find a healthier balance. Sunday arrived with unusual spring warmth. I purchased flowers for Mom and a bottle of Dad's favorite whiskey as peace offerings. Driving to my childhood home, I rehearsed opening lines. I love you all and want to support you, but we need sustainable arrangements. Ryan texted encouragement. Remember, setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Call me after if you need to talk. I arrived at 5:30 p.m., exactly on time, unaware that by 7:15 p.m., everything would change irrevocably. The familiar scent of Mom's pot roast greeted me as I entered the house. Some things hadn't changed since childhood. The creaking third step, the collection of family photos lining the hallway, the perpetually leaking kitchen faucet. Other details jarred my memory. A new leather sectional in the living room, a large flat-screen TV I didn't recognize, Dad's brand new golf clubs propped in the corner. Mom hugged me tightly. Despite years of illness, she remained the emotional center of our family, her eyes still bright though framed by deeper wrinkles. You look tired, sweetheart, she said, taking the flowers. Just busy with the new position. I placed the whiskey on the counter, earning a nod of approval from Dad, who was watching a baseball game without looking up. Melody emerged from her old bedroom wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse I recognized from a boutique window display I'd admired but couldn't justify purchasing for myself. She offered a quick side hug before returning to her phone conversation. Dinner's almost ready, Mom announced. Robert, could you help set the table? Dad sighed dramatically but complied, moving with the deliberate slowness of protest. I jumped in to help, noticing new porcelain dinnerware replacing our old Corelle plates. These are beautiful, I commented. Your father got them for my birthday, Mom beamed. Wasn't that thoughtful? I nodded, wondering which of my paychecks had funded this thoughtfulness. Once seated, conversations drifted to neighborhood gossip, Melody's latest gallery connections, and Dad's golf game. No one asked about my promotion or the 60-hour weeks I'd been working. I waited for an opening to introduce my prepared speech. So, Dad said, refilling his whiskey glass, we have some exciting news. Mom smiled nervously. We've been thinking about the house. It's so outdated, Melody interjected. The Andersons next door renovated last year, and it looks amazing. We've decided to do a complete remodel, Dad continued. Kitchen, bathrooms, master suite addition, the works. That sounds extensive, I managed, calculating rough costs in my head. Do you have contractor estimates? Dad nodded. All worked out. Construction starts next month. That's fast, I said. Have you secured financing? An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Mom busied herself rearranging food on her plate. Melody examined her manicure. Dad cleared his throat. Well, that's part of what we wanted to discuss, he finally said. With your promotion and new position. You're making serious money now, Melody added bluntly. The realization crashed over me. You're expecting me to pay for this renovation. Not all at once, Mom said quickly. We thought maybe you could help with monthly payments. The contractor offered financing. How much are we talking about? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. About $175,000, Dad replied casually, as if discussing pocket change. With your new salary, it should be manageable. I set my fork down carefully. Did it occur to anyone to discuss this with me before making plans? Why would we need to? Melody asked, genuinely confused. You always handle the finances. Because it's my money, I said quietly. Earned from my work. For my future too. Dad's expression darkened. After everything we've done for you, this family has always come first. I've put this family first for 10 years, I replied, struggling to maintain composure. I've paid the mortgage, medical bills, education costs. Here we go, Melody rolled her eyes. Saint Amber reminding us of her generosity. It's not about generosity, I said. It's about reasonable expectations. I can't fund a luxury renovation on top of everything else. Dad's face flushed red. So you're refusing to help your family? After we raised you, supported your education. The inaccuracy of his statement stunned me momentarily. I had financed my own education while supporting them. I'm not refusing to help, I explained. I'm setting a boundary. There's a difference. Boundaries? Dad slammed his palm against the table, making the new dishes rattle. What kind of selfish nonsense is this? Family doesn't have boundaries. Robert, Mom cautioned softly. No, Diana, she needs to hear this. He turned back to me, years of resentment burning in his eyes. You live in your fancy apartment, drive to your fancy job, while we're stuck in this outdated house. One renovation request, and suddenly you're too good for us. That's not what You know what your problem is? Dad's voice rose with each word. You're the most selfish daughter I've ever known. Never willing to sacrifice for this family. Melody nodded emphatically. Seriously, Amber. All you care about is yourself. Remember when you wouldn't lend me money for that gallery opening in New York? That could have been my big break. I paid your rent that month instead, I said softly. You couldn't afford both. See? Always keeping score. Melody threw her napkin down. That's not how family works. Mom remained silent, eyes fixed on her plate. Her passive acceptance hurt more than Dad's shouting. All these years, Dad continued, living like a stranger to this family. We barely see you except when we need money. Is that all we are to you? An ATM visit. The irony of his statement might have been comical if it weren't so painful. I looked at their angry faces, my family, the people I had sacrificed everything for, and realized they had no idea who I was or what I had given up for them. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The obligation that had defined my adult life suddenly felt like chains I could no longer bear. The silence following Dad's accusation stretched like a rubber band pulled to its breaking point. Time seemed suspended as his words echoed in my mind. The most selfish daughter I've ever known. My chest tightened as memories flashed before me in rapid succession, signing the tuition check for Melody's art program while canceling my dental work, working through a fever to finish a consulting project that would cover Dad's back taxes, explaining to Ryan why we needed to postpone our vacation for the third consecutive year because Mom needed a new CPAP machine. I remembered my 26th birthday, spent alone in my apartment because I'd used my celebration money to bail Melody out of credit card debt. The promotion I'd nearly missed because I was at the hospital with Mom instead of preparing my presentation. The condo down payment that disappeared to cover Dad's legal fees after his DUI. My hands trembled slightly as I placed my napkin beside my half-eaten dinner. Without speaking, I stood and walked to the front door. Where are you going? Mom called after me, the first words she'd spoken in my defense all evening. To my car, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll be right back. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, granting momentary relief from the suffocating tension. In my trunk was the emergency kit Ryan had insisted I keep, jumper cables, flashlight, first aid supplies, and beside it, the accordion folder containing 10 years of financial records. I'd brought it intending to use specific examples in my boundary discussion. Now it would serve a different purpose. When I returned to the dining room, the atmosphere had shifted. Dad was refilling his whiskey, Melody was texting, and Mom was clearing plates, the familiar choreography of avoidance our family had perfected. I have something to show you, I said, placing the bulging folder on the table. The thud it made commanded attention. What's this drama now? Dad sighed, but curiosity kept him seated. With methodical calm that surprised even me, I opened the folder and removed its contents, organizing them into neat piles: bank statements, mortgage payments, medical bills, tuition receipts, loan documents, and cash transfer confirmations. For the past 10 years, I've tracked every dollar I've contributed to this family. Initially for tax purposes, later as a reminder of why I was working 60-hour weeks. I placed Mom's medical file before her, a 3-inch stack of paid invoices. Your lupus treatments and medications, $127,864 since I took over payments. I don't regret a single penny of that, Mom. Her eyes widened as she gently touched the papers. To Melody, I presented education expenses. UCLA tuition, room and board, books, spending money, student loan payments I've taken over, and 9 emergencies that turned out to be vacations, $162,475. That's not fair, she protested weakly. You're making me sound like a mooch. I didn't respond, turning instead to Dad. His pile was the largest. Mortgage assistance after you moved back, $46,800. Car payments, $24,390. Credit card debt I paid off, $18,542. Legal fees, $8,700. Monthly loans never repaid, approximately $58,000. I placed a final document before him, a spreadsheet summarizing all contributions. Total financial support provided, $447,771 over 10 years. This doesn't include countless hours spent managing your finances, negotiating with creditors, researching affordable healthcare options, or the emotional labor of carrying this family's well-being on my shoulders. Dad's face had drained of color. Melody stared at her pile, uncharacteristically silent. During this time, I continued, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment I could barely afford, drove a car with 200,000 miles on it, postponed medical care, worked through pneumonia, canceled vacations, delayed marriage discussions with Ryan, and put my entire life on hold. I closed the empty folder. And tonight, I'm called selfish for hesitating to fund a $175,000 renovation. For finally considering my own future after a decade of prioritizing yours. We didn't know. Mom whispered. You never asked, I replied simply. Not once in 10 years did anyone ask what these sacrifices cost me. Dad's expression hardened defensively. Nobody forced you to do any of this. You're right, I acknowledged. I chose to help because I love you. But I can also choose to stop when that help becomes harmful to both of us. I reached into my pocket and removed my house key, placing it atop the documents. Effective immediately, I am cutting off all financial support. The mortgage payment due next week will be the last one I make. After that, your finances are your responsibility. You can't be serious, Melody gasped. What about my student loans? What about Mom's medication? Dad demanded. Mom's medical expenses are the only payment I'll consider continuing, and only after taking some time to reassess, I said, looking directly at my mother. For everything else, you'll need to create budgets, find additional income, or downsize. This is abandonment, Dad sputtered. After everything we've done for you. The question escaped before I could stop it. What exactly have you done for me in the past decade, Dad? One specific example. His mouth opened and closed without producing an answer. That's what I thought, I said quietly. I'll be in touch about next steps, Mom. I walked toward the door, a strange lightness spreading through my chest despite the gravity of the moment. Melody called after me, panic edging into her voice. You can't just leave us like this. We're family. I paused at the threshold. Yes, we are. And it's time we all remembered what that really means. The door closed behind me with a soft click that felt more final than any slam could have. In my car, the tears finally came, not from sadness or guilt, but from relief. For the first time in 10 years, I had chosen myself. I drove straight to Ryan's apartment, barely registering the familiar streets through my tears. When he opened his door, one look at my face told him everything. "You did it," he said, pulling me into an embrace. "I did," I confirmed, my voice breaking as 10 years of suppressed emotions flooded through the cracks in my composure. I finally walked away. The first 24 hours after walking out passed in a haze of emotional exhaustion. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, silenced my phone, and slept for 14 straight hours on Ryan's couch. When I finally checked my messages, the aftermath had already begun. 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, 5 voicemails, each more desperate than the last. "Dad, 8:42 p.m., you're being ridiculous. Call us immediately." Melody, 9:17 p.m., OMG, I can't believe you just did that. So dramatic. Mom, 10:03 p.m., Amber, please call. Your father is very upset. The messages evolved as reality settled in. Dad, 11:38 p.m., we need to discuss this situation rationally. Call me tomorrow. Melody, 1:14 a.m., my student loan payment is due next week. This isn't funny anymore. Mom, 7:05 a.m., your father checked the bank accounts. Are you really stopping the mortgage payment? Please call me when you can. By afternoon, panic had set in. Dad, 2:23 p.m. This is unacceptable. You have responsibilities to this family. Melody, 3:48 p.m., my credit score will be destroyed. Is that what you want? Ryan watched me scroll through the barrage with a concerned expression. You don't have to respond right away, he reminded me. Take time to process. They've never had to wait for anything from me before, I realized aloud. Instant response, instant money, that's been our relationship. On day 3, I returned to work, throwing myself into projects that had languished during my family's constant emergencies. My productivity soared without hourly interruptions. My boss noticed immediately. Whatever changed in your personal life, keep it up, she commented after I completed the quarterly analysis 2 days early. I haven't seen you this focused since you started. Meanwhile, the family messages grew increasingly frantic. Dad, day 4, the mortgage company called. Do you understand what foreclosure would do to your mother's health? Melody, day 5, my roommate's moving out, and I can't cover full rent. I need $1,800 by Monday or I'm homeless. Is that what you want? Mom, day 6, please just call, sweetheart. We can work this out. I crafted a single response and sent it to all 3. I need space to process. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Mom, your medication refills are paid through next month. That's the only financial support continuing for now. Their reactions were predictable. Dad's outrage, Melody's victimhood, Mom's quiet acceptance. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly news would spread beyond our immediate family. Aunt Patricia called on day 8. Your father told me everything. How could you abandon your family like this? Did he happen to mention the nearly $500,000 I've contributed over the past decade? I asked. Her silence answered my question. That's what I thought, I said before ending the call. Similar conversations followed with extended family members and family friends, each beginning with condemnation and ending with stunned silence when I calmly presented the financial facts. By the 2-week mark, I learned through Mom's best friend Susan that an emergency family meeting had been called, without me. Dad, Melody, and various relatives gathered to discuss the Amber situation and develop a strategy to bring me back to my senses. Their plan apparently involved escalation. Dad's messages turned threatening. If you don't resume financial support, we'll be forced to take legal action. We have evidence of your financial commitments. I forwarded this to my company's legal counsel, who laughed out loud. Verbal promises for family support aren't legally enforceable, she assured me. And even if there were written agreements, you've more than fulfilled any reasonable obligation. Meanwhile, real consequences had begun materializing for my family. Mom called in tears one morning during my commute. The power company left a disconnection notice, she whispered, as if Dad might overhear. Robert says we don't have enough for both electricity and his heart medication. The manipulation was transparent, but still effective. I'll pay the power bill directly, I conceded. But Dad needs to contact his doctor about generic medication options and payment plans. He's too proud for that, Mom sighed. Then he values pride over electricity, I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. 3 weeks after the confrontation, the family financial situation reached crisis point. Dad's truck was repossessed. Melody received notice that her student loans were entering default. The mortgage company initiated pre-foreclosure proceedings. Credit cards were declined at grocery stores. The renovation contractor, thankfully, had not yet been hired. Reality crashed into their lives with tsunami force. Without my constant bailouts, the precarious financial house of cards collapsed completely. The breaking point came when Dad was forced to explain their situation to his brother, my Uncle Jim, after missing a payment on money he'd borrowed last Christmas. The family's secret, that they had been entirely dependent on my income, was fully exposed. Jim said Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years, Mom reported during one of our brief phone conversations. He had to admit everything, how long you'd been supporting us, how much you'd contributed, all of it. How did that feel for him? I asked, genuinely curious. A long pause. Humiliating, she finally admitted. But necessary. We've been living in denial for so long. Word spread quickly through our extended family and social circle. The narrative shifted. The abandoned family became the exploitative one. The selfish daughter became the exploited provider who'd finally established boundaries. Melody texted a lengthy message that oscillated between apology and accusation. I never realized how much I depended on you, which is on me. But you could have communicated better before cutting us off completely, which is on you. Progress, albeit minimal. Dad maintained stony silence after his legal threats proved empty. Through Mom, I learned he'd been forced to accept a full-time position at a hardware store, his first regular employment in years. As the 5th week began, an unexpected email arrived from Dad's sister, Aunt Carol, whom I'd always been close to despite geographic distance. I've just heard what's been happening. I'm so sorry you've carried this burden alone for so long. Your courage in finally setting boundaries is admirable, though I know it came at tremendous personal cost. I've spoken with your parents and offered perspective they desperately needed. When you're ready, and only then, I hope you'll consider opening the door to a healthier relationship. Whatever you decide, please know I'm in your corner. Love always, Aunt Carol. Her message was the first that acknowledged my experience without demanding immediate reconciliation. The validation from a family member brought tears I didn't know I still had. That evening, Ryan found me on his balcony, staring at the city lights with Aunt Carol's email open on my phone. You've been carrying them so long, he said gently, you forgot what it feels like to stand on your own. I didn't realize how angry I was, I confessed. Not just about the money, but about the assumption that my life belonged to them. That my success wasn't mine. The money was just the symptom, Ryan noted. The real disease was the dysfunction. Can it be cured? I wondered aloud. That depends, he replied, on whether everyone recognizes they're sick. The 2 months following my walkout became a period of profound personal rediscovery. Without the constant drain of family emergencies, I found myself with unprecedented resources, time, energy, and yes, money. Dr. Patel suggested increasing our sessions temporarily to process the complex emotions surfacing now that survival mode had lifted. When you've been drowning for years, learning to breathe again can feel strange, she explained. During our sessions, I confronted long-suppressed feelings, resentment over sacrificed opportunities, anger at my father's abandonment and subsequent entitlement, guilt about my mother's situation, and frustration with Melody's perpetual dependence. I feel like I've lost a decade of my life, I admitted during a particularly difficult session. Not lost, Dr. Patel corrected gently. You made choices based on values of family loyalty and responsibility. Those weren't wrong choices, just unsustainable ones. How do I move forward without swinging to complete detachment? I asked. By establishing conditional engagement, she explained. Relationships with clear boundaries, mutual respect, and proportional giving from all sides. This concept became my North Star as I began rebuilding my life. I started with small personal reclamations, setting up the dedicated home office I'd always wanted, joining a weekend hiking group I'd never had time for, purchasing quality groceries without calculating their impact on Melody's latest emergency. Taylor insisted on celebrating what she called my Independence Day with a spa weekend I would have previously considered an irresponsible luxury. Soaking in mineral springs surrounded by California redwoods, I felt layers of tension dissolving that I hadn't even recognized were there. Your shoulders aren't up around your ears anymore, Taylor observed. You don't check your phone every 5 minutes. You're actually present. At work, my increased focus led to new opportunities. I was selected to lead our division's expansion project, a responsibility that came with both a substantial raise and significant professional visibility. You should have been in this position years ago, my boss commented. Your financial insights have always been exceptional, but something was holding you back. Whatever chains you've broken free from, I'm glad they're gone. The most profound changes happened in my relationship with Ryan. Without the constant intrusion of family demands, we discovered a deeper connection. Our conversations expanded beyond crisis management to future dreams. Weekend outings weren't interrupted by urgent calls from Dad or Melody. 6 weeks after the confrontation, Ryan suggested revisiting a conversation we'd started and stopped multiple times over our relationship. Let's talk about living together, he said one evening as we prepared dinner in his kitchen. Not because of financial convenience or family escape, but because I want to build a life with you. The proposal triggered both joy and fear. What if I'm recreating the same pattern? I worried aloud. Becoming financially entangled, losing my independence again? That's why we create agreements up front, Ryan said. Equal contributions, separate savings, shared goals. Partnership, not dependency. We spent the evening drafting a cohabitation plan that honored both our togetherness and our autonomy. The process itself felt healing, explicit communication about money and expectations, something my family had never practiced. 3 days later, I opened my first ever personal investment account, allocating funds that previously would have gone to Dad's credit cards or Melody's emergencies. The initial deposit wasn't large, but it represented something momentous, investment in my future rather than damage control of others' pasts. I also contacted a realtor about purchasing a small condo, not the luxury high-rise my family might have expected from my fancy job, but a modest 2-bedroom within comfortable commuting distance. A home of my own, wholly mine. As my personal reconstruction progressed, information about my family's adaptation trickled in through occasional texts from Mom and updates from Aunt Carol. Melody had found full-time work at a downtown gallery, a position below her aspirations, but within her qualifications. Her initial resentment had given way to reluctant pride in her first consistent paycheck. She'd moved to a smaller apartment with 2 roommates and was learning basic budgeting skills, and Carol had insisted on teaching her. Dad's hardware store position had become permanent. The humbling experience of answering to a manager 30 years his junior had triggered both resistance and eventual growth. His drinking had decreased out of financial necessity more than choice, but the health benefits were nonetheless real. Mom had applied for additional medical assistance programs I'd researched years ago, but Dad had deemed charity. With Aunt Carol's encouragement, she'd also joined a lupus support group and was slowly reclaiming her voice in the household. Their lifestyle had contracted dramatically. The house that needed urgent renovation was now listed for sale, with plans to downsize to an affordable condo. Designer clothes had been replaced by budget retailers. Restaurant meals had become rare treats rather than regular occurrences. In our limited communications, I detected hints of emerging insight. Mom mentioned learning to live within our means for the first time. Melody referenced budgeting for things I want instead of expecting them to appear. Even Dad, through Mom's relaying, had grudgingly acknowledged that adjustments were overdue. None of these changes constituted the profound accountability I might have hoped for, but they represented movement in a healthier direction, stumbling first steps toward financial reality. 7 weeks after walking out, I received an unexpected email from Melody. "I found a box of your things in the attic while we were packing. Inside was your Cornell acceptance letter and scholarship offer. Mom told me you gave it up when she got sick. I never knew. There were also birthday cards you never sent yourself because you used the money for my dance classes. I'm starting to understand what you meant at dinner. I have a lot to think about. If you're willing to talk sometime, I'd like to try." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement. The first genuine recognition from any family member of what my support had truly cost. That evening, Ryan found me on the balcony again, this time with tears streaming unchecked down my face. "Bad news?" he asked, settling beside me. "No," I said, showing him Melody's message. "Just the first sign that maybe, someday, we might find our way back to being a real family. One that gives and takes in both directions." "Are you ready to respond?" he asked. I considered the question carefully. "Not yet," I decided. I need to be certain I'm engaging from strength, not sliding back into old patterns. Ryan nodded, understanding without judgment. "You'll know when it's time." As the second month closed, I realized something profound. The guilt that had initially plagued me had transformed into something unexpected: self-respect. The voice that had constantly whispered selfish whenever I considered my own needs had quieted, replaced by a steadier conviction that boundaries weren't just permissible but necessary. In Dr. Patel's office, I articulated this shift. I used to think love meant sacrifice without limits. Now I understand that real love requires limits to remain healthy. That, she said with approval, is the lesson that will allow you to rebuild relationships worth having, with your family, with Ryan, and most importantly, with yourself. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I stood outside a small cafe in a neutral location halfway between our homes. Mom had suggested meeting here, her first independent decision in our new dynamic. Through the window, I could see her waiting, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, looking simultaneously older and more present than I remembered. The half-year of limited contact had created space for significant transformations on both sides. My life had expanded in ways I'd never imagined possible. The condo purchase was finalized, with Ryan and I establishing our shared home with careful intention. My investment portfolio was modest but growing. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my time for career advancement, for relationships chosen rather than obligated, for self-care without guilt. Taking a deep breath, I entered the cafe. Mom stood immediately, an uncertain smile wavering on her face. The hug we exchanged felt different, less desperate on her part, less dutiful on mine. "You look wonderful," she said, studying my face. "There's a lightness to you now." "I feel lighter," I acknowledged, settling across from her. "How are you really doing, Mom?" The conversation that followed contained more honesty than we'd shared in years. Mom spoke of the painful adjustments my withdrawal had necessitated: the house sale, lifestyle reduction, and most significantly, the shift in family power dynamics. "Your father had to face some hard truths," she said carefully. We all did. The stories we told ourselves about our situation weren't honest ones. "And now?" I asked. "Now we're living within reality instead of fantasy," she replied. "It's harder in some ways, easier in others. Your father works full-time. Melody's been promoted at the gallery. I've joined the hospital patient advocacy program 3 days a week. You're working again?" This detail surprised me most. Mom's illness had become a fixed narrative in our family, something to be managed rather than lived with. Part-time, she clarified. My doctor actually thinks the structure and purpose have improved my condition. I've been managing my symptoms better. When the conversation turned to our relationship, Mom surprised me with unexpected accountability. I owe you an apology, she said, eyes meeting mine directly. Not just for the financial dependence, though that's part of it. I'm sorry for not protecting you from becoming the family caretaker. That was my responsibility, not yours. The acknowledgement unlocked something tight in my chest. I wanted to help, I said softly. I know, she nodded. But there's a difference between contributing to family well-being and sacrificing your entire life. I lost sight of that difference. We all did. We discussed potential paths forward, not immediate restoration of closeness, but gradual rebuilding on healthier foundations. I explained my boundaries clearly. I would consider helping with her medical expenses specifically, but all other financial support remained off the table. Any relationship had to exist independent of money. That's more than fair, she agreed. More than we deserve, honestly. As our meeting concluded, Mom handed me an envelope. Your father wanted me to give you this. He's not ready to talk in person yet, but he needed to say something. Later that evening, I opened the letter in Ryan's presence. Amber. Words have never come easily to me, especially difficult ones. I've spent months angry at you for walking away, but the truth I'm finally facing is that I walked away first, when you were 16 and needed me most. The support you gave this family was never your obligation. It was my responsibility that I abandoned. The past 6 months have been the hardest of my life, but also the most instructive. Working again at my age is humbling. Living within actual means is constraining. These are challenges I should have faced years ago instead of allowing them to fall on your shoulders. I don't expect forgiveness or renewed financial support. Those ships have sailed, and rightly so. I only want you to know that your actions, while painful, forced growth that was long overdue. For whatever it's worth, your old man is finally growing up. Dad. The letter wasn't perfect. It contained no explicit apology, no specific acknowledgement of what I'd sacrificed. Yet between the lines, I recognized something unprecedented, my father's first steps toward accountability. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Melody inviting me to her gallery's opening exhibition. The added note read, "My work, my organization, my achievement. No handouts involved. Would mean a lot if you came, but I understand if you're not ready." I attended with Ryan, maintaining friendly but bounded conversation. Melody seemed different, more grounded, less entitled. When she introduced me to her colleagues as my sister, the financial wizard who taught me everything about budgeting, I recognized the gesture for what it was, public acknowledgement of my value beyond my wallet. The healing process moved in fits and starts over the following months. Some family gatherings were attempted, with mixed success. Old patterns occasionally resurfaced and needed immediate addressing. There were difficult conversations, uncomfortable silences, and moments of genuine connection. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries that had saved me from drowning. Financial discussions remained transparent and limited. Expectations were stated explicitly rather than assumed. When old resentments bubbled up, we addressed them directly instead of burying them beneath surface politeness. My relationship with Ryan deepened through this family reconstruction. His steady support without codependence provided a healthier model than anything I'd known. When he proposed 8 months after our confrontation, the timing felt right, not because my family needed me less, but because I'd learned to prioritize my core relationship appropriately. The wedding we planned was modest by design, a celebration of commitment rather than a financial spectacle. My family's attendance came with clear preemptive conversations about their roles and my expectations. Dad would walk me down the aisle but wouldn't give a speech. Melody would be a bridesmaid but wouldn't plan the bachelorette party. Mom would help with simple preparations but wouldn't overextend her health. These boundaries weren't punitive, but protective, creating space for new relationships to grow without repeating damaging patterns. Dr. Patel helped me articulate the central lesson of my journey during our final regular session. The opposite of selfish isn't selfless. It's self-full, knowing your worth, honoring your needs, and engaging from wholeness rather than depletion. "And what about your family?" she asked. "What's changed most fundamentally there?" I considered carefully before answering. "They're becoming people I might choose to know, not just people I'm obligated to support. And I'm becoming someone who can love them without being consumed by them." That, she smiled, is the definition of healthy attachment. As I reflect on this challenging year of transformation, I recognize that healing remains ongoing. Some wounds may never fully close. Trust rebuilds slowly, and old habits resurface under stress. Yet the foundation has shifted irrevocably. We are learning, imperfectly but genuinely, how to be a family connected by more than financial dependence. The most profound change exists within me. I no longer flinch when my phone rings with a family name. I no longer automatically calculate how much of my paycheck belongs to others. I no longer measure my worth by how much I sacrifice. Instead, I'm discovering who Amber Wright really is beyond her caretaking role, her interests, ambitions, joys, and limits. I'm learning that no can be a complete sentence, spoken without guilt. I'm recognizing that true generosity flows from abundance, not obligation. If my story resonates with you, perhaps you're facing similar choices between self-preservation and family expectations. Remember that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic connection. The most valuable support you can offer loved ones might be the example of healthy self-regard. Have you experienced similar family financial dynamics? How did you navigate them? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey helped you reflect on your own situation, please like and subscribe for more conversations about family relationships and personal growth. Thank you for witnessing my story, and may you find the courage to honor both your family bonds and your personal boundaries.